that we would seek to enforce. And now we go back to on how they would be enforced, which is going to start us in scope and administration, Chapter 1.
Before we do that,
Sure.
ask a question real quick. Guys, I'm sorry for going backwards, but in this boarding, it talked about in 101.1, boarding up and shall be painted to correspond to the color of the existing structure, which I like. Something that popped in my head after last week when we were talking about peeling paint, flaking, chipping paint that's more than 25% having to be removed and repainted. What's the thought of adding some language in that? And I'm talking about section 304.2.
There it is.
And that would probably be my sign to shut up.
No. I was like, are you sure you want to go?
Okay.
But adding, that's right, adding some language that talks about maybe using that same wording to be painted to correspond with the existing color. And here's where I'm going with this. Someone makes a complaint on a section of the front of their house that's peeling. City officials tell them they've got to remove that section and repaint it. It's a nice white house, and they go back with a big old purple square. And that'll happen. Someone's going to get upset. So putting some kind of language in there to cover that.
That's a good thought. Yeah, we have a similar situation that you're aware of where I live with something being totally different. It stands out like a sore thumb and all the neighbors just love it. Yeah, I can see that as a valid point.
I mean, if you're asking my thoughts, again, this is y'all's committee. I have seen houses that intentionally painted every other board a different color. I mean, the idea of the code was not specifically pretty, because we don't want to determine what is and isn't pretty. It was structurally sound and secure. So again, we wouldn't have any opinion one way or the other about that.
Well, I would think it would be lots easier to repaint it the same color it is, because you wouldn't have to necessarily get up there and do a complete, it would be lots easier to paint the same color.
Unless you were being spiteful.
Yeah, and there would be that one person that would do that at least. There is always that one. Pardon?
You need to learn to get along with your neighbor.
Some will just do it because somebody told them to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be that, but I don't know how you can police that and ask our inspection department to
Yeah, they're
police that, and
kind of a slippery slope when you think about
kind
it.
of a,
What's that? Yeah, I mean, again,
I'm just asking.
you can
thoughts
make
and
whatever
feedback.
recommendation you want to make. Again, my caution would be crossing the line between
Yeah,
what we think of pretty and what somebody else thinks of pretty. If somebody wants to paint their house polka dot, I certainly don't want to live next door to them. But from a government standpoint, who are we to tell somebody they can't do that?
I guess if somebody's painting each board a different color, at least it's consistent. But if you had somebody that came up and their eaves were, I don't know, and just decided to paint one side purple just to make the person living next to them mad, that's a whole different ballgame. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. So if you put in there that just corresponds with the existing structure, like it says in that boarding, like in the boarding section where it says, what section does it say about the paint?
correspond to the color of the.
Shall be painted to
existing
correspond to the color of the existing structure. Just add that sentence in there. I mean, yes, it would be kind of hard to police, but if you did have somebody that decided to paint a ginormous purple square in the side of their house, you could at least maybe kindly suggest to them that that's not a good idea. I don't know.
Unless you consider that one spot graffiti.
Oh,
You have something for graffiti, don't you?
That's true.
So again, this is your committee. You can make whatever recommendations you would like to make.
I think we need to table that and think about it a little bit.
I like that idea.
Let's just think about it a little bit and come up with a good way to put it, I guess you'd say. If we can come up with a good way to put it, I'm all for it, but I really don't want someone out there testing our inspection department on the right to paint their house polka dot, you know?
Well, that'd be the other thing.
That would, I mean, that would be, it's going to test, enough of this stuff's going to test you anyway. You got enough to be tested by. And I think that's going to be so rare. Eventually, somebody that does something like that, they're going to disappear before long. They're going to get tired of aggravating folks.
We could only hope.
So we're going to table that and look at it.
Just table it and think about it and talk about it some. And
That sounds good.
All right, scope and administration.
No, what?
Chapter 1, very beginning. Page 1. Section 101, general. These regulations shall be known as it says International Property Maintenance Code of name of jurisdiction herein referred to as this code. Get caught up. We are recommending that the International Property Maintenance Code of name of jurisdiction be stricken and that we put in place Jonesboro Property Maintenance Code. Any discussion or questions or? Would anyone like to recommend that?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second to change that to, these regulations shall be known as the Jonesboro Property Maintenance Code, herein referred to as the code. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, scope. The provisions of this code shall apply to all existing residential and non-residential structures and all existing premises and constitute minimum requirements and standards for premises structures, equipment and facilities for light, ventilation, space, heating, sanitation, protection from the elements, life safety, safety from fire and other hazards, and for safe and sanitary maintenance, the responsibility of owners, operators, and occupants, the occupancy of existing structures and premises, and for administration, enforcement, and penalties. Okay, intent. This code shall be construed to secure its expressed intent, which is to ensure public health, safety, and welfare insofar as they are affected by the continued occupancy and maintenance of a structure and premises. Existing structures and premises that do not comply with these provisions shall be altered or repaired to provide a minimum level of health and safety as required herein. Servability. If a section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase of this code is for any reason held to be unconstitutional, such decision shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this code. By way of note, this is exactly the same language that's in the front part of all of our existing fire prevention codes. Applicability, 102, general, where there is conflict between general requirements and specific requirements, the specific requirement shall govern. Where deficiencies occur between provisions of this code and the reference standards, the provisions of this code shall apply. Where in a specific case, a different section of this code, specifically different requirements, the most restrictive shall govern. So basically that's saying if you have two different regulations within this, that one covers, say, graffiti and one covers peel and paint, whichever would be the most restrictive actually would apply. Maintenance, equipment system, devices, and safeguards required by this code or a previous regulation code under which the structure or premises was constructed altered, or repaired shall be maintained in good working order. No owner, operator, or occupant shall cause any service, facility, equipment, or utility which is required under this section to be removed from or shut off from the disconnection or discontinued for any occupied dwelling, except for such temporary interruptions as necessary while repairs or alterations are in progress. The requirements of this code are not intended to provide the basis for removal or abrogation of fire protection and safety systems and devices in existing structures. Except as otherwise specified herein, the owner or the owner's designated agent shall be responsible for the maintenance of building, structure, and premises. Any questions? All right. Application of other codes. Repairs, additions, or alterations to a structure or changes of occupancy shall be done in accordance with the procedures and provisions of the international, and I'm not going to read all those codes. I'm going to read you what we recommend they be changed to, because a lot of those are not applicable. So our recommendation is to, again, ignore all the codes listed. Our recommendation is that read provisions of the Arkansas Fire Prevention Code, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, Arkansas Energy Conservation Code, Arkansas Fuel Gas Code, Arkansas Mechanical Code, Arkansas Plumbing Code, and National Fire Prevention Act 70. Nothing in this code shall be construed to cancel, modify, or set aside any provisions of Chapter 117 of the Jonesboro Code of Ordinances, which is where our zoning codes are held. So those are the recommendations we would make to that. Again, all of the reference codes are Arkansas-based, with the exception of the NFPA 70. So those are the recommendations we would make for that,
Which are currently in effect now.
which are currently in effect now.
What the heck is the International Fuel?
Yeah, that's the first time I've seen that one.
Never heard of that. You know what that is?
Plumbing regulations for gas.
Oh, okay.
Gas.
Okay.
Venting.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a recommendation and second to make those changes. Any other discussion? All opposed, or I'm sorry. All approved? Aye. Opposed? All right, existing remedies, 102.4. The provisions of this code shall not be construed to abolish or impair existing remedies of the jurisdiction or its offices or officers or agencies related to the removal or demolition of any structure which is dangerous, unsafe, or insanitary. Workmanship, repairs, maintenance, work, alterations, or inspection or installations which are caused directly or indirectly by the enforcement of this code shall not be
Shall be.
executed and installed in shall be executed and installed in a workmanlike manner and installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. 102.6, historic buildings. The provisions of this code shall not be mandatory for existing buildings or structures designated as historic buildings when such buildings or structures are judged by the code official to be safe and in a public interest of health, safety, and welfare. Any questions on that? 102.7, referenced codes and standards. The codes and standards referenced in this code shall be those that are listed in Chapter 8 and considered part of the requirements of the code to the prescribed extent of each such reference as further regulated in sections 102.7.1 and 102.7.2. So again, that's just stating that Chapter 8 that we talked about, we will actually go back and look at all the codes that we've recommended that reference. Most of them are the Arkansas Fire Prevention Codes, and create that reference standard. Exception, where enforcement of a code provision would violate the conditions of the listing of the equipment or appliances, the conditions of the listing shall apply. 102.7.1, conflicts, where conflicts occur between provisions of this code and the reference standards, provisions of this code shall apply. 102.7.2, provisions in referenced codes and standards, where the extent of the reference to a referred code or standard includes subject matter that is within the scope of this code. The provisions of this code, as applicable, shall take precedence over the provisions of the reference code or standard. Requirements not covered by the code or by code. Requirements necessary for the strength, stability, and proper operation of an existing fixture, structure, or equipment for the public safety, health, and general welfare not specified covered by this code shall be determined by the code official. Application of references to chapter or section number or to provisions not specified, identified by number shall be construed to refer to such chapter, section, or provisions of this code. 102.10, other laws. The provisions of this code shall not be deemed to nullify any provisions of local, state, or federal law. Any questions over any of that? Don't worry, I'm tired of hearing myself read too. All right, Section 103, Department of Property Maintenance Inspection, General. The Department of Property Maintenance Inspection is hereby created, and the executive official in charge thereof shall be known as the code official.
We already have that now, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be a new department? No?
Technically,
Yes, no.
I was about to say technically, but let me get to the next one, and I think it'll actually kind of become a little more clear. Let me catch up with my notes. Section 103.2, and I think this will clear this up. The way it says, what it says is, the code official shall be appointed by the chief appointing authority of the jurisdiction. We're recommending that be changed to the chief building official for the city of Jonesboro shall be the code official.
Okay.
So, by effect, that makes this a subsection in the inspections department.
I guess my thought was, there's somebody going to be hired to do this?
Yeah, we'll
Not
cover.
gonna fall
we'll cover-
on current
You're getting
code.
ahead. We'll cover that in deputies.
Go ahead.
Do I have a recommendation to make that change to 103.2? To read, the chief building official for the city of Jonesboro shall be the code official?
We already have a chief building official? That's what I thought. I was just clearing that up, yes. Okay. I guess so move.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 103.3, deputies. In accordance with the prescribed procedures of this jurisdiction and with the the concurrence of the appointing authority, the code official shall have authority to appoint a deputy or deputies. Such employees shall have powers as delegated by the code official. And our intent to the city would be that any deputy would have to meet the standards that the chief building official said they would have to meet. So certifications and whatever he says they have to be certified for.
I think their certification needs to be almost as equal as yours, right? Or would you take certain areas?
They'll use the same certifications that's required to be an inspector, department.
For a city code inspector?
Yeah, they'll be state certified in all training.
Okay, yeah, that,
It's all the inspectors we have now.
we don't want somebody out there,
State of Arkansas, inspect as long as
So all the inspectors you have now can do all of it. They're all, okay.
I understand they might be specialized, but they should be certified to inspect whatever they're going to inspect, okay?
Right. You had a question? All right, 103.4, liability. The code official, members of the Board of Appeals, or employees charged with the enforcement of this code while acting for the jurisdiction in good faith and without malice in the discharge of the duties required by the code or other pertinent law or ordinance shall not thereby be rendered liable personally, and is hereby relieved from all personal liability for any damage occurring accruing to persons or property as a result of an act or by reason of an act or omission in the discharge of official duties. Any suit instituted against any officer or employee because of an act performed by that officer or employee in the lawful discharge of duties and under the provisions of this code shall be defended by the legal representation of the jurisdiction until the final termination of the proceedings. The code official or any subordinate shall not be liable for cost in an action, suit, or proceeding that is instituted in pursuance of the provisions of this code. So that was a whole lot of legal jargon to basically say as long as they're not acting with malice, then they will fall under the city's umbrella of, so the city could be liable, but the individual is not. That's a standard for pretty much probably his job, I know my job, and for, I mean, like I said, just pretty much a standard liability. Fees, 103.5, fees, I'm not going to read it because we're recommending that the fee section be deleted.
There you go.
So any discussion about that or questions?
Just want to make sure there's not fees applied to, as one rumor I heard, which I know those are not good, rental properties. Because they ought to be, if there's a fee applied to a rental property inspection, there ought to be a homeowner's inspection as well.
We're recommending that 103.5 be deleted.
Gone. Good.
Any other discussion?
That's just saying the fee, that if you get a complaint and you have to have an inspection, that inspection is free. You just have to go and.
Right, that's not saying if you get caught for a violation and get
Right,
cited
it's
for
the
violation.
fee,
You'll
it's the
get
fee,
fined, but,
Right,
the inspector.
right,
is-
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
One of the things that require permits now would be,
right, yeah, this will not affect
Permits.
any permits.
Right.
For building.
Somebody shows up at somebody's house to inspect, they can't charge my fee.
Right. So, any other discussion? Would anybody like to propose that change?
I recommend that.
Motion and second to recommend deleting 103.5 fees. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You sure you're not opposed to that, John?
I'm all for that, dude.
right.
Don't get in my pocket.
104, duties and powers of the code official, general. We'll get through this and we'll start touching on right of entry, and then that's probably where we'll have to quit and pick up right of entry again next time, because I'm sure that's a place that we'll have some discussion. But general, the code official is hereby authorized and directed to enforce the provisions of this code. The code official shall have the authority to render interpretations of this code and to adopt policies and procedures in order to clarify the application of its provisions. Such interpretations, policies, and procedures shall be in compliance with the intent and purpose of this code. Such policies and procedures shall have no effect of waiving requirements specifically provided for in this code. Any questions over that? None. Inspections. The code official shall make all of the required inspections or shall accept reports of inspections by approved agencies or individuals. All reports of such inspections shall be in writing and be certified by a responsible officer of such approved agency or by the responsible individual. The code official is authorized to engage such expert opinions as deemed necessary to report upon unusual technical issues that arise subject to the approval of the appointing authority. So any questions on that? All right, right of entry. This is the one that we heard so many rumors about, and I'm going to see if I can do an adequate job of explaining it after we read it. So, right of entry. Where it is necessary to make an inspection to enforce the provisions of this code, or whenever the code official has reasonable cause to believe that there exists in a structure or upon a premises a condition in violation of this code, the code official is authorized to enter the structure or premises at reasonable times to inspect or perform the duties imposed by this code, provided that if such structure or premises is occupied, the code official shall present credentials to the occupant and request entry. If such structure or premises is unoccupied, the code official shall first make a reasonable effort to locate the owner or other person having charge or control of the structure or premises and request entry. If entry is refused, the code official shall have recourse to the remedies provided by law to secure entry. So, and plainly, this will not give a code official any more right to enter into your house than any other government agency, any police officer. So if I come to John's house at 3:30 in the afternoon and say, hey, John, I'd like to come in and see if there's anything illegal in your house, first of all, I would have to have a reason to be there. I would have to have reasonable belief.
You got a complaint.
Got a complaint, right? So that, number one, I'd have to have a reason to be there. Number two, I have to request entry, and the occupant has the right to say, no, you cannot come in, okay? It doesn't, it's saying it has the authority. Basically, it means that where individuals have the right to be free and do what they want to, okay, government only has the right specified by law that they can do. So as a police officer, somebody has to tell me that I have the authority to come on a property, meaning the state of Arkansas, city of Jonesboro has given me authority to come on to private property. Otherwise, even no matter what was taking place, I would have to stand at the edge of property and say, hey, you know, quit fighting or quit shooting. Or, I mean, the authority to enter onto private property has to be specified. So that's what this is saying. Just because it says they're authorized to be on the property doesn't mean they have permission or they can legally come onto the property.
However,
That's just-
a tenant can allow you in.
A tenant could allow.
What is their age? I mean, if there's kids at home and they let somebody in, does it need to be an adult, somebody over a legal age to authorize them to come in? That seems like that would make some kind of sense.
Yeah, standard, I mean, that's going to kind of fall standard. It's going to have to be somebody and basically it's all going to fall on the official to be able to prove that they were there legally. So if you have a 6-year-old say, yeah, come in, anything that they do is going to get thrown out because it's my job, or whoever's in doing this, if I'm the one doing it, it would be my job to prove that I was there lawfully. And that's not going to cut it. So yeah, we're going to look for an adult. I mean, that's,
If there's no adult present, what happens? Come back later? Or?
we're not coming in, yeah. We would have to come back later. Or, and again, to look at the last sentence that says, if entry is refused, the code official have recourse to the remedies provided by law to secure entry. That means a search warrant. That means a judge. Now, you have to get a judge to authorize a search warrant. You're going to have, number one, something specific. Here is the problem. Number two, it's going to have to be substantial. So they're not going to give, for instance, they won't give me a search warrant to go search somebody's house for possession of a switchblade knife, which might be illegal. That's not going to happen. So it's going to have to be, again, substantial. So the only way that I could see a judge authorizing entry is if we were sufficiently able to show the judge that, number one, we needed to go in for life safety, for a life safety saving issue.
And just as a reminder, it's complaint driven, and part of the complaint process is that the code official has asked the tenant what steps they have made to rectify the problem with the landlord already. So if you're at the point where you're going to go to a house, it's my understanding that all of those other recourses have happened, unless it is like something life-threatening at the moment.
And we'll get into that when we get into the
Right.
proposed policy and procedure, but this is just talking about, what I want to make sure that you understand is that this does not authorize somebody to come in without permission.
But when I read this, it looks like a tenant can authorize you to come
A
in.
tenant could authorize,
I know you're going to go through policies and procedures, but according to this right here, you could just use this and you don't even show them policies and procedures, and you could get into a tenant-occupied property.
if the tenant said, yes, you could come in. But just, I mean, you as a landlord can't tell your tenant, okay, you're not allowed to invite a guest over.
Well, it's true.
I mean,
But you might say you're not allowed to invite the inspector over without me there. I think that ought to be the owner, not the occupant. The owner, unless it's a life safety issue. Because now you're going to get tenants bust up the toilet and give you a phone call. Hey, now I know your policy and procedures, we've discussed this. Your policy and procedures is going to overcome some of that. I'm like Dan. 20 years down the road, will they still do that?
okay, but the problem with that, what I see is if a landlord that isn't taking care of their property
It's true.
says, no, you can't come in, and the tenant's saying, okay, but I have no plumbing in the house.
Well, that would be an issue, I'm sure, but I don't want the tenant taking a
Does that
sledgehammer,
happen
busting
often?
up the toilet and coming,
What's that?
calling you.
We talked last month about trying to keep some kind of a log on complaints based on what we're doing here. Have we got any results on that log? We were going to try to track it. You were going to try to track it if you could. I'm just thinking if we can track it now, you might could track it when it goes into effect. But if you can't track it now, how you going to keep up with it? But have y'all been keeping a log on, so we have an idea how many complaints we're talking about in this kind of deal?
In the inside, yeah.
I've received a couple that wouldn't even be applicable to this code. The complaints I've received in the last month, I've received probably 2 or 3 of them, has to do with mold. And mold isn't covered in this code and nowhere else in Arkansas that I'm aware of.
Nobody's certified on mold in the city anyway, I don't believe.
Again, those are the only complaints I've received of late has been about mold. And then one about a swimming pool that was unrelated.
I guess my question is that right of entry just really hangs me up. If you've got 2 or 3 complaints like that, you could open a keg of worms, like John was saying. You could open
I
a
just don't
keg
want
of worms.
my tenant to have an opportunity to do something, call you, get me in trouble for something they did. I know we're going to eventually get to that, but they don't think that far ahead sometimes. They've destroyed the property by that time already, and now I've got the problem to fix it. They might end up being in the wrong, but I got to go to court to get my remedy, to get my money back. But if they think they look at something like this, say, oh, I can bust John's toilet up, call the city, nothing happens to them, nothing happens to me, they did it, I still got to fix it.
But you would have to fix it whether they call
I'd have
the
to
city
fix it anyway, that's right. But I just don't want them having that
But
option.
technically, if there's
Or an
any
option.
other violation you see while you're in there on that, you can enforce that to be repaired too, if I remember right. Once you're in the door, anything's game.
Well, that's true.
I thought we already covered that and said, right, that,
Safety issues only.
I mean, like I said, that's why we kind of looked at the internal stuff anyway, because I think we took out most everything that doesn't have to do with directly health, safety, and welfare. But again, this has to do with legal authority and the right to entry. Again, there's not, if we had every tenant in Jonesboro call up and say, hey, we've got a complaint, we're not going to rush out to go look at those complaints. Our first goal is going to be, have you notified the landlord?
right.
Now, ultimately, our goal is the same as your goal, which is to make sure your rental property is taken care of.
Absolutely.
But
I
we're
don't
not,
Give them the option or the opportunity to take something out of this code and destroy my property with it.
if
Using that
you
advantage.
got people doing that, you've probably already
They'll
started.
be gone for long, that's true, but then I've got the repair.
I mean, and I guess your argument is that having a code that says you have to repair the toilet is going to entice somebody to specifically tear up the toilet.
If they think they can get me in trouble, if they're behind on their rent, number one, they're behind on their rent, they're going to get vindictive. They do. That's just nature right there. I
They
got
get
one
mad
right
at you
now.
because they're behind.
I
The,
got one right now.
Didn't we say that all complaints we investigated someone we would contact them or the
Yeah, and
I don't have, I know Todd will be calling me right away. I
A
know.
procedure, that's the word I was looking for, that would go, they would have to go through before it became an issue.
And I guess in this day and age with smartphones and picture taking, if he has picture proof that he left his property in good condition, I mean, it's going to be, when you check the renter in, you know, you have all this working, you signed this, it's working. I have a picture of that toilet, and they tear the toilet out. Well, it's going to be pretty hard for that occupant.
They don't think that far ahead. They go ahead and destroy it
I
and then
get
get after
that,
me.
I get that, but then that comes to the tenant, a landlord thing, and don't rent to those people.
That's true.
Right.
That's your responsibility. I mean, I don't mean that ugly, but it is. That's just
It is.
tenant, landlord. And this is for everybody, the whole citywide. And I just don't see it being a problem personally, and I also see that there are going to be people not quite as, what's the word, responsible in their rental properties that need to be dealt with. I can think of a few. And if they get numerous tenant complaints, they probably deserve them. So, I don't know, I think you have to protect the people that rent from unscrupulous people. I mean, I think that's just part of it. If you're not unscrupulous, you don't have anything to worry about except for the vindictive ones, and then that's going to be the tenant-landlord thing, and you.
Once they discover they can use this, it doesn't matter the consequences. They don't care about the consequences. The consequences are, I got to repair. You know,
Well,
that's just where it comes down to. And I've got one right now. I've got one at this point right now.
Obviously, changing the code, and this code has to be approved by city council. Explain to us the process of your procedures. Can a procedure be changed without a city council vote, or can that, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the procedures are here's what the ordinance is going to say. The procedure is how you go about doing that. So yes, I mean, administration has the ability to alter policy and procedure to best affect how it's administered.
So if we want to put a safeguard for something like this, it needs to be done. If it's not done in the code, administration can change it.
Sure.
Okay.
Now, again, the remedy for that is just like if one of our code officials now does something that, hey, you don't like the way they did it, then there's always we are a service-oriented department, so you can complain. Now, again, we've waived stuff before because, hey, we didn't follow the right procedure. We didn't do things the way they were supposed to be done. So, I mean, there's always that recourse. Now, again, when we're talking about right of entry, this is, and Arkansas Fire Prevention Codes, all three of them have this same right of entry as verbatim. This has to do with the legal authority to come on private property and the restrictions that it puts on them. Now, as far as I'm not sure how you could constitutionally limit a tenant from inviting somebody onto the property. I don't know that that would fly with constitutional muster.
so you're saying that the fire code already has a provision like this right of entry?
Yes.
So if some tenant calls and says, I don't have fire things in each bedroom, the fire code would allow them in already if the tenant let them in to prove that they didn't have
Right.
smoke detectors.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
already there.
That was one of the things that we looked at was, what does right of entry say in our existing codes? And it is verbatim the exact same thing. Now, that said, it is 8:43. I figured we would have to end here to finish this discussion up next week.
Right.
So if you would like to adjourn, I'm sure there are spelling tests to study for.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine with me.
All right? Thank you.
I'm so glad I passed spelling.